Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Grizzly Bear Sim's YouTube channel, and welcome back to Calmsden Farm, episode number 14. Thank you all so very much for coming back for another episode. And before I really get started into the meat of this episode, just want to welcome all of the brand new members of the channel. You're all my friends, and I appreciate you joining. We have had a little bit of a growth in the last couple of weeks, which is a good thing. Hopefully, you are enjoying the content that I put out, and I welcome you to stick around and enjoy yourself. So, thank you all so very much. All right, well, we are in a brand new game day, and we are in. I'm going to increase our time just a little bit here, and that way we can speed time along, and everything will be just happy. Um, Off camera yesterday, well, sort of on camera in episode number 13, you saw that Sid was mowing this field here. He also mowed a another field that we have that is in that general direction over there. I think you can probably see the silage bells parked over there on that field. We are going to move some of those down to the BGA here momentarily after we finish this field and one more fertilizing field. And managed to get quite a few. We got 48 silage bells off of this field here, field number 10 it is. And also managed to just while we were in sort of the mood for cutting grass and cutting grass and baling is one of my favorite things to do. It's kind of my zen zone, if you kind of will, because um, and it's something that I kind of enjoy doing off camera because I can just totally get into the immersion, and we'll even kind of, well, not really mow in cab, but I will definitely bale in while I'm in cab, and just kind of enjoy the immersion. I don't do a whole lot of in cab um, video stuff on video, just simply because you guys can't see a whole lot. But it's just kind of my zen moment, and I really was enjoying it yesterday. So as I said, Sid cut field number 10, and then we moved over to the other field. I forget the field number right now, but we're headed over there in just a moment and cut that field. And then I came over here and I cut and tedded and basically baled this small field here, field number 8, and baled this as hay, just simply because we just needed a little bit more hay to get through the winter and get through the early spring until our grass is able to grow again and we can cut that. But yeah, mowing is one of my favorite things to do. I suppose mowing and harvesting to a certain extent, because again, kind of harvesting, especially if I'm doing it off camera where I'm not having to worry about talking and carrying on a conversation that you guys can understand and interpret and everything, is just kind of the moment that I can just kind of chill and really get into the immersion of the game and the enjoyment factors that we all enjoy about Farming Simulator. Wanted to give a very brief shout out to a couple of folks. Thanks for leaving comments in the previous video about my little handiwork that I did at 7 years old, the carving. I think that was in episode number 12 that I talked about that, which dropped on Friday of last week. Today in the real world, it is Sunday. I don't normally record Farm Sim content on Sunday. I don't even typically play Farm Sim on Sunday. Sunday is kind of one of my days that I use for Flight Sim, but I just was in the mood for Farm Sim, and kind of the way that Fury Machine Gaming announced on one of his recent videos. Kind of he has re-engineered things and kind of got his gaming life back in check, and we just do things the way that we want to do things. And I'm old enough and retired, and I have lived my life to serve other people and everything. And so in my retired life, I do things as I want them to be done, how I want to do them, and what I enjoy about it. And that's how we're going to run. That's how we run this channel, and it just works out really, really well. All right, we're going to head over to the other field, and we're just going to take this spreader because we may fertilize that once we get done picking the bells up. And I think this episode might be rather short. I don't know. We'll just kind of see what happens when we get there. But the shout outs I wanted to give to read my notes here to Ranger. Ranger left a comment on the video that I had done talked about my carving my name into that oak windowsill, and he had a very similar experience, although his outcome was a little bit different because at a very young age his father then taught him how to sand, fill, and revarnish, and basically return that piece of wood that he had carved his name on above his door back to what it looked like before he had done his handiwork on. And I thought that was a cool story. My dad, it was interesting because I talked to my dad on the phone about 3 times, 2 to 3 times a week, and because I had just literally found out about this carving that it had survived all of this time. I just found that out a few days ago, and so the next time I talked to my dad, I said, "Hey, let me tell you something." And I told him more or less the story that I told you all, um, and I said, "Did you even know that I had done this?" And he said his exact words were, "I don't remember it, and I don't really remember seeing that you had done this." He said, but that doesn't necessarily mean that maybe it's just something that he had forgotten. I'm pretty sure that when we moved out of that house back in '85, it was my senior year in school. My parents had sold the house kind of well, it was the first part of the school year, so it wasn't even Christmas yet. We spent Christmas in a new house, a new location that I finished out my senior year in, and it was a rental house because we were planning on moving as soon as I graduated from high school, and so it was just kind of convenient. There was an opportunity for them to sell the house that I grew up in, and so that's just what they did. And then we moved into a rental house for a while. I finished out school, and then we moved, or my parents moved. I moved off to college, and then my parents moved to another location in Texas. Well, um, I'm pretty sure that when they got the house that I had grew up in ready to sell and everything, I'm pretty sure they hired someone to come in and do some cleaning and stuff like that because they were quite busy packing and stuff. And so it's quite possible that he just never saw it. I had curtains in my room that covered the windowsill, best I can remember, and I probably had a few knickknacks on top of that windowsill anyway. It was by memory, it was about 6 inches or so wide, so it was wide enough that it could have held a like a sports trophy or something like that. The kind of stuff that boys have in their rooms and keep and such as that. So it's quite possible that they didn't see it. And of course, my mom passed away a couple of years ago, so I have no way of asking her. It's quite possible that if either of my parents would have known about it, it's possible that my mom would have been the one that would have known about it, and she just wouldn't have said anything to my dad or anything like that. But I did say to him, I said, well, I said hypothetically, I'm 55 years old now. My dad is 79 years old. I said, so I know you're not gonna spank me at this particular point in time. And I said, but what would you have, if you would have known that this would have happened, what would you have said? And he said his exact words was, he said he would have probably encouraged me not to do any more handiwork around my room, but he did share with me and said that he had done the same thing in his room of the house that he grew up on the farm. And so I told my wife after I got done talking to my dad, I said, well, I guess it runs in the family, because my dad had done more or less the same thing so many years ago. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. I know I've teased this a couple of times, and it's kind of taken a few videos from the first time that I mentioned it. for me to kind of get around to telling the story about the farm. And I will just say that you can do the math. Well, I've already said that I'm 55, so you can certainly do the math. I was born in 1966, and I was born, and my parents at the time, because my grandfather, well, when I was born, we lived in a different house. My parents had only been married about a year at this particular point in time, and we are full, so we're going to head to the BGA now. Um, so my parents had been married, about a year. I came along, and at that time, my grandfather was still alive, and um, and let's get in cab to do this. My grandfather was still alive, and there's some pictures of me and my grandfather. My grandfather's holding me, and so he's still alive. And we live we live in town. We live in the same little town that I often talk about. Um, am I gonna? I know I've done this once already. Managed to get through this gate. Let's see if we can do this. All right. So we lived in this little town where I eventually moved to and lived in the house that I carved my name in. But when my grandfather died in in '67, it left my grandmother living alone on the farm, and so she didn't want to live out there alone. And so my mom and dad, as I make that really big jump, my mom and dad bought a trailer house and had moved out onto the farm, onto a small piece of land that was next to the old homestead and everything, and lived there for about 4 years, I suppose. Well, my grandfather and I, like I said, I talk to my dad a few times a week, and I have really, over the last year or so, my dad has really enjoyed talking about and reminiscing about his time growing up on the farm. And he wasn't that close to my grandfather when he was young, when he was growing up, because my grandfather was born in 1895. My grandfather on my dad's side. So there's a pretty big generational gap between my grandfather and my dad. My dad was born in '43. So my do the math. My grandfather was already 48 years old, something like that, when my dad was born. And so, but my granddad was a farmer. That's all he had ever done, was farmed, carpentry work, he repaired churches, he repaired houses, he repaired barns, he built his own barn. He built the house that my dad grew up in, that my dad was born in and grew up in. He built that house. And he was just an incredible man, and a very good man. But because of my dad growing up, and my dad he had two older brothers and an older sister, but they had already moved out by the time my dad was born, and so he really has no memory of his brothers and sisters being on the farm working. So as soon as my dad became old enough to do chores like helping to plow and helping to plant and do those kind of things, my his brothers and sisters had already left home. And as you can tell, we've already brought up a few loads here to the BGA. Now, one of the things that we did do was I moved 24 bells from what we had at the farm at the dairy. I took 24 of those bells, moved them up here so we could get the BGA going, because those obviously were already fermented, and then I replaced those with bells that are in the process of fermenting as we speak, and I think they're about halfway done. All right, that's our first load. So we'll head on back now and do this again. Um, so anyway, and just to also kind of set the stage here, because my other set of grandparents, my mom's mom and dad, well, they were born in the '20s, so there was, like I said, there was almost a 25-year gap between my two sets of grandparents, and it was kind of quite interesting. But anyway, And just kind of in retrospect, my grandfather on my dad's side, who I'm talking about, the farmer, he fought in World War One. My granddad on my mom's side fought in World War Two. So again, kind of generational thing. And my dad's oldest brother, my uncle, who's also still alive, he was born in the 20s, so he was actually the same age as my grandparents on my mom's side. So anyway, just to kind of fill you in on those kind of things. So um, my granddad, and I'm going to show you a picture here. I'm going to show you a picture of the barn that my granddad built. Now this he built this sometime before my dad was born, a few years before my dad was born, and I remember this barn when I was growing up on the farm, and it's a beautiful barn, and I would love to have something similar to this in farm sim once we move over to like an American style farming map. But this is the barn that my granddad built, and it was just fantastic. And of course, the house and everything my dad built, or my granddad built that. But there's some other things that's still in the area around East Texas that's still standing today that my granddad had built, and even some stuff that my granddad and my dad worked together on as my dad was a teenager. He was building things. So I've been talking to my dad, like I said, about some of the things that my granddad did on the farm, and I was really interested in really understanding what sort of farm my granddad ran, and what he planted and stuff like that, and my granddad's money crop, and this was the exact words my dad used. He said the money crop that my granddad planted each year was sugarcane, and that was what my granddad was known in the area for, basically making syrup. And so he would fire up um, these giant pots and fire and everything, and basically make syrup. And people would come from all around the area to buy my grandfather's syrup, and he was very well known for that. And but they also did they planted tomatoes. Now this area where I grew up in, was it had a railroad, had a rail line that came through, and it was very well known, that particular area, for tomatoes. And people would, a lot of the women and everything would essentially come out and help work and pack tomatoes. Many of my aunts on my even on my the other side of my family all got involved in this. And so my grandfather and my dad raised tomatoes, and also cotton. They planted cotton in this area. My dad remembers very, very plainly of picking cotton by hand. And my grandfather didn't have a lot of. He had a tractor. It was an old Farmall. Not sure what year it is. The next time I talk to my dad, I will try to get that, if he can remember approximately, because again, I would love to maybe do some kind of farming with a farm all on an American map, and kind of replicate maybe my granddad's farm as best as I can. Obviously, not with all the equipment and everything, but it just be able to do some things. But they obviously, my granddad had anywhere from 50 to 60 cows. He would raise cows and hogs for purpose of meat, and he would have these slaughtered, or he would do it himself and sell the meat, or obviously keep some for themselves. And primarily, a lot of the crops he raised, he had large gardens, and those were the things that he and my grandmother would obviously can and put up for the winter, and for the next spring and everything, until the crops came back around. So I mean, he pretty much was self-sufficient to that standpoint. Again, because you needed money even back then, trading, buying fuel, buying clothes, things like that. Um, he would do the money crop. He would do the sugar cane for the syrup, and it was quite successful with that. And so let's see what else. But they did a lot of repair on churches and things of that nature. And my granddad was, like I said, was really well known in the community for for his handiwork. Now, my granddad had an injury when my dad was about 5 or 6 years old. My granddad was planing some lumber for a barn that he was building. Not the barn that I showed you the picture of, but another barn that they were building on the farm. And he had an injury. He had an accident with the planer, and he lost part of his left hand. He basically, after the accident, he only had um, oops, nope, we don't want to do this. I hit the wrong button. We're going to abort the unloading. That was close. And then fold this guy up here. That's what I get for. Oh, I had this happen one time before, and it won't fold that it won't fold that thing up because I have aborted the landing. So we're going to see if we can cut across this field here. I hate to do this, but there's a glitch or something. You can't fold that arm up if you attempt to unload the bales. Even though you abort them, it doesn't give you that option. So anyway, as I wrap things up and wrap this episode up here, because I've made a fatal mistake as we Dukes a hazard over that over that berm, but he had that accident, and he really, because of that, he was really only he only really had one hand. But he had modified tools and stuff that he could tie a strap onto, say, a pitchfork, and put his bad hand kind of through that as a guide. And the thing is, I guess the story that I'm trying to say here is that my grandfather did not allow his injury, or what we might call a handicap kind of today, affect him in any way. My dad says that my grandfather did not he did not let this injury affect anything that he would do. He would not turn down any sort of job. He could climb a ladder. He could climb a ladder carrying shingles on his shoulder, and he just never let it bother him. Just a fantastic, extraordinary man. And part of that generation that came up, through, obviously he was an adult through the Depression, fought in World War One, was a farmer, and just raised a wonderful family, and obviously my dad and all of that, and just never let anything get to him. And he had a strong faith in God, and just really worked hard. That's what he did all of his life, was worked hard, and he worked hard until the day that he died. And he actually died on the farm. He had been working um, that day. It was a hot day in August, and he basically came in after he had been working out in the fields. I'm not sure what he was doing. He was retired, but he was still. Um, I mean, when I say retired, he was not really farming anymore, big stuff, but he was the kind of guy that he would not sit down. So he had stuff to do, and he had been out working, and it was a hot August day in Texas, and he basically came in, got him a glass of water, went out and sat on the picnic table that he would basically sit at every afternoon when he finished his chores and everything, and he collapsed and died there. So he um, he just did. He lived his life on his terms and worked hard all of his life, and passed away. And that is kind of the story of my grandfather. Now, I'm going to, in future episodes, talk a little bit about how that the experiences of me growing up in rural Texas, kind of on the farm for the first 5 years of my life, and even still kind of moving into a more rural area, living in a rural area part of Texas, and the influences of having access to studying agriculture in high school and shop projects and all that kind of stuff, helped to kind of create the person that I am today, and gives me a kind of a solid understanding on some of the things that I've done in my own home. A lot of the DIY projects. I finished my own basement, did all the electrical wiring, did all the framing, did all the sheetrock. Those were all things that, all skills that I picked up throughout my life, and the fortunate opportunities that I had of kind of growing up in a part of Texas in a time where, schools taught this stuff. And I had a dad that was, very into teaching me and handing things down to me that he had learned from his father. And so that's kind of how what I will tell you about maybe next time or the time after that or whenever. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I very much appreciate it. I know that we haven't really done a whole lot this episode. Well, I guess we did fertilize and we did move those hay bales, or those silage bales, which is all important, and you need to do that for the future of the farm. And we are earning money off of the BGA work already. We've got some silage in the digester, and that's working. And obviously, because I put that manure heap down, we're collecting manure. I think we've got about 10 or 12,000 liters of manure already, and we will move some of that over to the digester. We're not going to spread manure on fields. We will spread slurry and digestate on the fields once we can accumulate enough to actually be able to do that. So we are in the last game day of November, playing 2 game days per month, 6 game days per season. So most likely when we do come back together, it will be in December. And according to the weather forecast, we are expecting some snow. Now, whether it will accumulate, I don't know. But we will just kind of continue to do things as we need to do them here on the farm, and continue, of course, to have fun as we are doing it. And I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to watch my videos and to comment and communicate with me. Very much fun to see your comments and to engage in that way. And I'm just very thankful for each and every one of you. You're all my friends, and love having you here on the channel with me as we farm our virtual farms together. Again, thanks for watching, and I will speak to you all very, very soon at the next video. And God bless you all, and talk to you soon. Bye for now.